Part 18. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 171. First Level Arcanist. What, a ring? Is it just one level of certification? The middle-aged clerk exclaimed, and several people at the counter came over to poke their heads in the air. The situation outside the counter wasn't much better either. Gretel was rustling behind him, and he was immediately surrounded by people on 3 levels inside and 3 outside. The brown-haired magician who had just been chatting with Gretel raised his neck, stood on tiptoe, and tried hard to look at the badge. 1 ring. He himself is a 2nd-level magician. From apprentice to level 2, he published 7 or 8 papers for 5 years, but only 3 were reviewed and approved by the Magic Association, and one of them was a 2nd work. The instructor recognized his hard work and added a name to the paper. Let him graduate with good grades. The 3 papers, together with the improvements in magic, gave him 7 research points in total. There are still 3 points missing from the 10 points required for a first-level arcanist. And for these 3 research points, God knows how many years of research it will take for him to get them. 1 year? 2 years? After leaving the magic school, you can take risks, take on quests, open up the wilderness, explore woodlands. These jobs can allow you to earn more than 100 gold coins per year, which is enough for you to live a wealthy and decent life. But if you want to do research, drop 100 gold coins and it will be gone in a splash. And without research, there are no research points, and without research points, there is no Arcanist level. And this boy, who had just arrived at the Parliament headquarters and hadn't even received the magician badge yet, had just completed the certification and already had more than 10 points. How do you have so many points? He asked tremblingly. Greet himself had no idea, so he raised his eyes and looked at the clerk. Where can I check the points acquisition record? Magic Review Area, Paper Submission Office. The clerk was still in shock and had not recovered, so he answered reflexively. Gretel leaned down on the table, stretched out his arm and took out the badge, turned around and left. The crowd crowded around him until he was stopped by the security personnel at the entrance of the management area, and then gradually dispersed, turning back to listen to the clerk's call. Greet quickened his pace and walked into the magic review area, rushing to the office where no one was before. The keyboard on the desk was still broadcasting dutifully. To submit a paper, please press 1, and to inquire about paper feedback, please press 2. Greet pressed 2 decisively. There was a ding when the keyboard was pressed, the front rose up, and a tablet popped out. Please put the magic badge into the magic circle, or press the key to enter the query number. Having a badge is really much more convenient. Gretel looked at the query number with at least 10 digits and letters in it. He wiped his sweat secretly and put the newly acquired magic badge on the tablet. The tablet buzzed, and countless silver light threads entangled and rippled, flying deep into the crystal. After a while, the third mechanical sound sounded again. To check the latest paper feedback, please press 1, to check the feedback of the last 10 papers, please press 2, to check the total list of points and obtain points, please press 3, check. I traveled to the present, and it seems that I have only submitted 3 papers. Based on the principle of maximizing interests, Greet pressed 2 without hesitation. The mechanical voice said please wait and then fell silent. About a minute later, there was another soft ding sound, and the transfer box rose from the table and opened. A piece of writing paper lay quietly in the box. White and smooth, with stiff tentacles, a 4-paper size. Gretel stretched out his hand and took it out. At first glance, he saw the record of 3 points gained so far. For the X-ray article, 2 research points and 3 contribution points will be awarded. The article on bat pathogenicity was the most rewarding, with 8 research points and 30 contribution points awarded. As for B ultrasound, There are only 2 research points and 3 contribution points, which is the same as the X-ray gain. So few? At least I can get into the paper on Arcana. Greet was a little unconvinced. He continued to look down and saw the reviewer's evaluation of the paper on bat pathogenicity, which made him laugh and cry a bit. The research ideas on the mode of plague transmission are of pioneering and guiding significance. The researcher took the initiative to study this project without being assigned a task, which reflects his sincere concern and dedication to the Magic Council and is very worthy of commendation. Okay, so a consolation prize for moral exemplarity? Greet calmed down and looked down. A new application of echo magic and its role in exploring the internal organs of the human body. An improvement over the echo magic. There is no breakthrough in the structure of the spell model, but it is a groundbreaking expansion in terms of application scope. The level is only apprentice level, but it requires specific types of bats as casting materials. The materials are not valuable, but are difficult to obtain in large quantities. A large number of feedback images of normal organs are required for comparison, and the caster needs to undergo long-term training and memorize a large number of images before this magic can be put into practical application. Based on the criteria of magic level, novelty, creativity, practicality, etc., 2 research points and 3 contribution points will be awarded. This. Gretel held the magic badge in one hand and the grade paper in the other, pacing back and forth in the room. Although the evaluation on paper is short, it cannot but be said to be to the point. B ultrasound cannot be popularized just once it is invented. If nothing else, hand a B ultrasound image to the patient without any markings or the conclusion of the laboratory doctor. Can the patient understand it? Not to mention patients, even doctors forget all the medical imaging exams after taking the exam. They are not familiar with the positions of human organs, do not memorize normal B ultrasound images, and do not memorize what diseases indicate abnormalities. This examination method, how much effect can it have on them? It's of no use at all. After struggling for a long time, this magic is just a dragon-slaying skill. Gretel suddenly laughed, and with a little force of his fingers, he kneaded the smooth grade paper into a ball. It would be of no use to anyone other than himself if this magic was learned. The reward of 2 points and 3 contribution points was probably given by a big boss who paid attention to him because of the word pioneering. But it does not matter. I didn't come here just for the points. I worked hard for so many days and went in a big circle. My purpose was to get a B ultrasound. Now the goal is achieved, isn't it? Besides, I am familiar with the positions of human organs, tissues, and blood vessels. Which image is normal and which is abnormal? Others don't know, but I know. I can draw them and organize them. Later doctors, as long as they work hard to memorize them, at least they can assist in diagnosis. Every doctor knows how useful B ultrasound is. I believe Elderwood, Pastor Matthew, teachers, and the bald bishop, as long as they try it, they will die to learn it. Of course, if they can memorize so many images, just, haha. Gretel raised his head and smiled, his depression gone. He quickly walked out of the White Tower, returned to the academy to dig out the magic he had retained, and called the barbarian. Bernard, let's go to Elderwood's place. Go find someone. Go figure it out. Go complete the information. Go and organize medical magic imaging B ultrasound volume. Want him to take the lead? Greet said it was obligatory. Do you want him to draw all the images inside now, one by one, with bare hands? Gretel said, kill me. Not to mention that the medical imaging he studied in his previous life only published some images, such as fatty liver, only CT and MRI pictures, and no B ultrasound at all. Even if it did, he would not dare to draw with bare hands. What if the images of humans in this world are different from those in previous lives? What if the image representation of extraordinary people is different from that of ordinary people? Drawing it up casually and letting other doctors carry it after the drawing is done is a waste of human life. It's killing people. Medicine, modern medicine, and evidence-based medicine are, after all, a discipline that originates from practice and must return to practice. What to do if there is no image? Go and accumulate cases. Go see patients and do physical examinations on normal people. Go paint. I have seen 100, 1,000, or 10,000 patients, recorded all the cases, and drawn all the images. Compare, summarize, verify, and finally form a teaching material that can guide future generations of doctors. Of course, to achieve this, Greet cannot do it alone. He is just a first-level magician and a first-level priest. Oh, he was promoted to level 2 last night, but he has not been certified, he is not familiar with the place, and his reputation as a doctor has not been established. To do something like this that is far beyond your ability, be decisive and ask the boss for help. Greet carried 2 test tubes of potassium permanganate, and his follower Bernard carried half a bag of short-eared vampire bats and went to Oak Ridge again to look for elder wood. The first time is fresh, the second time is familiar. If you have any questions, approaching the boss is the only way to advance research. What's more, everyone cooperated very happily in the last bat incident. The elder handed the news directly to the legendary mage and sold them a favor. Pastors at the middle and lower levels have developed their experimental abilities and learned new experimental methods. The sect profited from a large number of experimental animals, and after selling them off, the funds were greatly enriched. Gretel received a piece of arcane. Afterwards, Elder Wood patted Greet on the shoulder with satisfaction and said, "Next time if you have anything to study, feel free to contact him." Greet decisively ran to the boss. The second time he set out, he no longer had to ask people along the way. Oak Ridge was particularly easy to find. Start from the city of Nevis in the northeast direction, keep walking along the river, keep walking until you reach the large lake more than 10 miles away and then turn right. Continue walking along the river for 7 or 8 miles and follow the first large tributary in the north into the mountains. After passing 2 hills, you will reach Oak Ridge. As long as you are not a road addict, you are not afraid of getting lost. Gretel ran along the river bank, and the magical mount he summoned ran fast and steady. Even a useless horseman like him was not afraid of falling off his horse. The barbarians on the side were carrying big bags and leaping over the large rocks on the river bank, running faster than him. As he ran, the sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded behind him, and a horse, much faster than the magic mount, galloped towards him, getting closer and closer. Gretel was frozen in the middle of the road, not knowing whether to move to the left or to the right. As soon as he hesitated, the bright white horse, wrapped in the strong wind, flew past his right side, causing his hair and clothes to fly up. Gretel couldn't help but mutter, "Overtake from the left." However, the rule of overtaking from the left is not established in this world. Greet turned his head and looked around while complaining. When he glanced over, his eyes lit up. The knight on the horse is dressed in black, with a long sword hanging from his waist, and his knee-high riding boots tightly clamping the horse's belly, making his waist more slim and his legs long and neat. The knight wrapped a girl in a bright red cloak, hugged him with his arms, and tried to make the girl sit more comfortably in front of the saddle, using only his legs to control the horse. Leaning forward, head immersed in running away. "Stop! Don't leave! Put down Iris!" Far behind, a huge roar rolled in. Greet turned his head, backward, upward, and followed the sound, only to see a dark cloud spreading from the horizon. On the dark cloud stood an old magician, holding a staff and roaring continuously. Gretel raised his eyebrows and looked forward again. "Oh! The young couple eloped and were hit by the girl's father? That knight looks pretty good, with a good figure and good riding skills. It can be inferred that he has good fighting ability, and he cares about the girl's appearance." The girl leaned softly in his arms, her face buried in his shoulder, and she was also full of dependence. Why bother? Why bother? Why bother beating a mandarin duck with a stick and chasing him thousands of miles away? Thinking so, Gretel had no intention of trying to persuade her. The man in black holding the girl is most likely a knight, and although the old magician can learn flying at level 5, but he can fly so high and fast, he is probably a great magician above level 78, or even above level 10. With such a small body, he just needs to look at the roadside, intervene, or forget it. The aftermath of the battle between both sides can crush him, okay. Greet even slowed down a little. There was the sound of horses' hooves as they galloped forward, and dark clouds rolled over his head. After a while, they both rushed out of his sight. However, continuing forward, turning right along the river and walking out for half an hour, I saw the old magician and the knight both falling on the ground, facing each other from a distance. The old magician held a law enforcement staff and stood high on the rocks on the shore. A row of translucent light shields around him rotated clockwise, firmly blocking the owner. The knight held a sword in one hand and stretched his other hand behind his back to support the girl, facing up. Aim at the old magician. On the mountain road beside the river, a thick wall of ice stood, blocking the road completely. This, if you quarrel, don't block my way. Greet had no choice but to rein in his mount from a distance and look forward. The old magician and the knight were dozens of meters apart. No one came forward, but they just argued from a distance. Leave Iris to me. Don't even think about it. I am her father. She does such a thing, and you still want to protect her. Iris is a good girl. It's not what you think. As long as I'm here, you are not allowed to take her back. The voice on the rock was old and angry, while the voice below the rock was clear and high-spirited. After hearing a few sentences, Gretel couldn't help but rub his eyes and looked at the Black Knight again. By mistake, the knight turned out to be a girl. It's a female knight. He is tall, even a little taller than Greet, with short hair and lean body, and a pair of arms and waist. The Gretel was behind and couldn't see her appearance, but her heroic posture alone impressed him deeply. During the confrontation between the two sides, the old magician swung his staff and the female knight involuntarily tilted to the side. Just when Greet thought she was about to fall, the female knight had already kicked off the ground. Her riding boots left half a boot mark deeply on the muddy ground. She took a step forward and still stood firmly in front of the girl. Don't touch her. Thanks to @book-eating demonic insect for the 5,000 starting coins reward. Congratulations to everyone for collecting another 10,000 UN reward. There will be an extra update tonight. Also, more than half of the 10,000 rewards are rewards on the iOS side. It will take 3 months to get it and you can only get 1/4. I still have to add more rewards according to the 10,000 rewards, 555. Friends on the Apple side, can you try logging in on the PC side next time and reward? Please subscribe. Ask for monthly tickets, please recommend votes. Asking for a book review. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 172. Greet huddled far back, listening to what was said to each other in front of him, constantly arguing and blaming each other. After listening for a long time, he figured out what was going on. When the old magician returned from home for several months, he found that his daughter, the girl from Iris, was pregnant, and he was angry and wanted to deal with her. Iris asked her friends for help, and the female knight who received the news ran out with her best friend. Gretel has yet to hear the identity of the female knight, where she plans to take her best friend, and what her plans will be in the future. The ground ahead has been shaken. The two sides have gone through a series of processes such as confrontation, argument, and quarrels, and finally started to take action. Greet pulled his mount and hid behind a huge rock, looking around. The old magician raised his staff high, an icy blue light fell on the ground, and the thick ice wall immediately began to deform, soften, melt, lift, shape. Finally, it turned into an ice giant more than 3 meters high, staggering forward step by step. Does this thing still punch forward from a distance and spit out ice breath? Whoever is next to someone will be frozen and slowed down. Gretel couldn't help but think about the water element in the game. However, the fighting power of the ice giant is obviously not comparable to that of the water element. As soon as it appeared, the female knight became nervous, bowed forward slightly, and her toned body bounced upward like a female leopard. She held the girl in her arms and walked backwards for more than 10 steps, placed her properly in a stone crevice, tightened her cloak around her, and drew her sword to face her. The long sword was unsheathed, drawing a pale golden arc of light in the air, and silently cut into the ice giant's right fist. Turning sideways, the ice block as big as his face suddenly fell to the ground. So strong. Gretel took a breath of air. He poked the barbarian. "Are you okay?" "I'm not afraid of it." Bernard squatted beside him and clenched his fists, cracking his knuckles. After a pause, he hesitated and said, "It will be frozen, my big bones are broken." The time when the ship was blown up, Bernard and the knights from the Lord of Glory's church exchanged moves, and the bone rod that was as tall as him was cracked. At that time, a huge beast shadow flashed away. Gretel later asked Elder Erwin and learned that the beast's spirit had been injured, and a lot of precious materials were needed to repair it. Gretel didn't know where to buy the materials on that list, even if he couldn't afford them. Most of the materials centers in colleges do not have them at all. The ice giant was quite angry when one of his fists, or a piece of it, was cut off. It looked up to the sky and screamed, spitting out a ball of crystal white mist, and the ground in front of it was immediately covered with white frost. The female knight returned her sword to protect herself, waving a long sword vertically and horizontally, intertwining into a network of light in front of her, firmly resisting the ice fog in front of her. Taking advantage of this gap, the ice giant raised his leg and stepped out hard. The ice giant was more than 3 meters tall and nearly 4 meters tall. The female knight stood in front of it, only reaching its waist. However, it was not afraid of this kick. It raised its long sword high, and a blazing flame ignited on the sword, and it slashed towards the ice giant. The sword sank silently into the giant's right leg, cutting it directly like a high-temperature spray gun. The huge block of ice fell with a crash, and the ice giant stood on one spot on one leg, swaying and threatening to fall at any time. "Bravo!" Greet admired softly. The female knight was not satisfied with such an attack. She rolled forward, slipped under the ice giant, jumped up, and brandished her sword. A pale golden sword light shot out from the top of the long sword. With one stroke vertically and horizontally, the right leg and right arm of the 3-meter-tall ice giant were broken one after another. Finally, the ice giant hit the ground with a bang. The female knight jumped onto the ice giant and chopped it down with her sword. Just after cutting off the sword, the girl huddled in the crack of the stone suddenly screamed, "Selena! Get out of the way!" A large swath of ice mist rose. The ice giant rolled on the spot, its right arm, right leg, fist, and pieces of broken ice automatically bonding together. Fortunately, the female knight jumped away in time and was not frozen by the huge creature. However, when she fought her way through the ice mist and stood in front of the giant again, the golden flame on the sword became much thinner and almost extinguished. From Gretel's perspective, you can see her raising her left arm and wiping the sweat from her forehead. The ice giant stood up straight and moved forward again. Gretel stretched out his fingers to compare and determined that the giant was about a quarter shorter, but his movements were also much more flexible. Seeing Selena approaching with a sword, it raised its right fist and struck it down. When it was about to collide, it suddenly pulled back and swung out its left fist heavily. There was an explosion, and the female knight fell down 3 steps, kneeling on one knee, her body trembling. Selina. Get out of the way, I don't want to hurt you. On the cliff, the old magician spoke again. The girl huddled in the crack of the stone also screamed miserably, Selina. Let's go. You did your best. Go quickly, my father will not hurt you. But you will die. Selina looked back for the first time. From a distance of more than 10 meters, Gretel saw that her forehead was broad, her cheeks were plump, her chin was pointed and pretty, and her thick raven eyebrows flew into her temples, making her master look more determined and fearless. When she looked back at her friend, her emerald green eyes were blazing, adding an edge to her beauty that almost made her feel awe-inspiring. At this moment, she held the sword in her right hand, guarding against the ice giant, and turned her body half to the left. Looking at the petite girl curled up in the cloak, her eyes were full of worry. Your father will kill you. He won't let you. Iris, be patient for a little longer, and I will take you to my teacher. Go quickly, Iris cried. She stretched out an arm tremblingly, stretched out to her friend, and waved outward. The most Dad can do is abort that child, Selina, go away. You can't beat my father. Go away. The ice giant paused for a moment and took another step forward. This time, its attack was particularly ferocious. Not only did it wave its fists repeatedly, but there was also ice mist under its feet. Wherever he passed, the ground within a 3-foot radius froze piece by piece. The female knight waved her sword as hard as she could, but was still forced back. The sword's light dimmed and almost disappeared. She finally retreated in front of Iris, turned to one side, hugged her friend, and then leaned backward. However, just such a small delay has already been exploited by the opponent. The ice giant's fists collided hard, and a large cloud of ice mist exploded instantly, filling the air quickly. As soon as the female knight picked up Iris, the ground under her feet was already white and turned into ice. The solace of her boot slipped and she fell backwards. Above, the furious ice giant raised his fists and smashed them down at the same time. Ah! Iris screamed. From the top of the cliff, the old magician's exclamation also came, Stop! Stop! However, the ice giant's movements did not stop at all. The female knight said nothing and raised the sword with all her strength, a mouthful of blood sprayed onto the sword. The flame on the long sword ignited again, this time, it turned into a pale gold light mixed with blood, trembling slightly, blocking the huge ice fist that was smashed down at high speed. Stop him! 5 or 6 steps away, Greed pushed Bernard hard. The barbarian strode out, raised his bone club, and punched the ice giant from bottom to top. With a loud bang, the bone stick and the ice fist hit each other, evenly matched, and froze in the air. However, the ice mist had already wrapped around Bernard's legs. With the crunching sound, the barbarian's feet, calves, and knees were all frozen to the ground. The ice giant slowly lowered his head, stared at Bernard with his eyes burning with blue light, and raised his fists again. Gretel strode forward, standing in front of the barbarian and above the female knight who fell to the ground. Put your left hand into the waist bag, stretch your right palm flat, push it up and forward, and push it out quickly. Blazing white fire burst out suddenly. Get away. Thanks to @Xiaoao who doesn't like studying for the 500 starting coins reward. Thanks to @Faraway by Xiahua for the reward of 100 starting coins. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, please recommend votes. Asking for a book review. Please take photos of the female knight. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 173. Get away. The 60-degree cone-shaped fan can spray high-temperature flames 10 meters away, and can be compressed and explode within 2 or 3 meters. Ice versus fire, head-on confrontation, pure energy. The diffuse ice mist was swept away first, and the white fire did not stop, directly impacting the ice giant. The body made of solid ice was thinned on the spot. A large amount of white mist rose, and then, drops of ice water fell like rain, forming a small puddle between the ice giant's feet. The ice giant froze. The old magician's voice came again, "Back off! Back off!" Water splashed. The ice giant staggered backwards, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, and finally sat down on the ground, solidifying into a lump of unconscious ice. The old magician flew down from the rock. Holding a staff in one hand and a robe in the other, he stood on tiptoes to avoid the ice on the road. He jumped up and down like a fat duck and ran over. Seeing that her daughter was fine, the female knight fell to the ground, but she didn't look like anything was wrong. When her shoulders slumped, her whole body collapsed, and she became 10 centimeters shorter on the spot. So far so good. After exhaling this breath, he turned to Gretel with a grateful face, "Thank you." This ice element suddenly lost control. If you hadn't blocked it, I really wouldn't have had time to send it back. You. He looked up at Bernard, tilted his head back at a 45-degree angle, and saw the top of the big bone rod. "What do you call me? Are you and your followers okay?" The barbarian smiled naively, put away his bone club, and stood behind Gretel. Gretel waved his hand naturally and took on the social responsibility of the two of them. "I'm fine. With the master's control, even if we don't help, we should be able to take back the ice elements in time. At most, the lady will be a little frightened. Is the lady okay?" "Huh? What a dead girl," the old magician glared at his daughter, then started blowing his beard and glaring. The female knight hugged her friend and took 2 steps back, her face full of caution. The two sides met their eyes and immediately started a new round of quarrel. Gretel stood aside and listened to a few words. He felt as if his head was going to explode. He couldn't help but speak out to persuade. "Master, Miss Knight, can you allow me to say a word?" "What do you want to say?" The old magician's face softened. Greet bowed slightly. "Master, even if you are angry, you still love your daughter. No matter how you deal with the situation, it is always better to find a high-level healer to take action. I happen to be going to visit Wood from the Order of the God of Nature. Elder, if Master has time, can you take Miss with you?" "You?" The old magician looked at him doubtfully, and his eyes glanced at the badge on his chest, "First-level magician, first-level arcanist. At this level, can you also directly visit Elder Wood? By the way, I didn't ask you just now, what is your name?" Gretel quickly reported his name. Seeing the old magician frown slightly, as if recalling, he added, "Last month's arcane." "Oh, I remembered," the old magician suddenly realized. "That paper was indeed signed by many priests, so you are familiar with him." "It's indeed quite familiar," Gretel gestured, and the barbarian ran back behind the rock, took the oak staff and handed it to Gretel. The old magician glanced at the 2 green leaves on the head of the staff, and his brows jumped again. A first-level magician, a first-level arcanist, and a second-level priest. What kind of approach does this kid have? Although strange, it does increase the credibility. He nodded slightly. "Then I'd like you to introduce me. Convince one, and there's another." Greet turned to the female knight, and Selina stood up to cover her friend. Her emerald green eyes were blazing, her lips were moving, and she looked ready to refuse. Gretel rushed to speak. "This lady, there is obviously something wrong with Miss Iris's current situation. If she is not, then she must be sick. It would always be good for her to find a good healer, right? See a doctor. See a doctor. If you have any questions, be sure to see a doctor, and don't keep it to yourself." The female knight's eyes flickered slightly and she turned back to look at her friend. Iris hid behind her, petite and pale, like a frightened little dove. Her slender fingers grasped the edge of the cloak. Even though it was covered by the cloak, she could still see the swell of her belly, which indeed looked a bit like she was pregnant. "I'll take her away. Don't touch her." She spoke with a straight face, looking half at the old magician with guarded eyes, and half at Gretel, the barbarian behind her. Greet breathed a sigh of relief and nodded quickly. Okay, take her with you. Try to walk as steadily as possible. I think she's not feeling well." The group set off again. Arriving at Oak Ridge, Elderwood happened to have no patience, so he welcomed them in and looked around. "What's the matter? Who is uncomfortable? This damn girl doesn't learn well. I've been out for a few months, and she's become like this," the old magician said angrily. He pulled off the cloak, threw it back to the female knight, and pointed at his daughter's belly. "Master, please take action and get rid of this scoundrel. I will take her to another place. In a few years, she can marry innocently. I'm not pregnant. I haven't even touched a man's hand," Iris cried out. The old magician roared angrily, "Who else are you trying to lie to? Your belly is so big, you can't eat anything, and you still want to vomit. Do you have to give birth to a scoundrel before you are willing to admit that you have done something scandalous? Don't be anxious, Elderwood smiled and reassured, "Tolga, don't be anxious, girl, don't cry yet. Sit tight and let me use my magic to take a look." He waved away the others, held his oak staff in both hands, and murmured a prayer. A clear brilliance shone from the green leaves on the head of the staff, covering the girl's body. Iris was crying so hard before that she calmed down soon after being shrouded in green light. She lowered her head and refused to shed a single tear. "Huh. This magic also has the function of soothing emotions." Greet was surprised and couldn't help but take a step forward. I saw Elderwood's eyes half open and half closed. The look was very familiar, and he was obviously observing something in his meditation field of vision. "Make a half circle to the left, a half circle to the right, then squat down and feel it carefully for a while, and finally exhale with certainty. Not pregnant?" "No," the old magician looked at the elder suspiciously. "Old Moo, don't save face for me. You damn girl has such a big belly." "I really didn't feel the child's breath of life." Elderwood shook his head firmly. The old magician looked disbelieving and grabbed his wrist. "Really? Don't coax me. I had a priest come to my door a few days ago, and they said I could feel the breath of life in my belly." "Indeed, it is, but it is very messy and complicated and has nothing to do with children," Elderwood retorted resolutely. The old magician was even more uneasy. "Don't lie to me. It's easy to handle now that it's so big. If you don't get rid of it, it will be even more troublesome in the future. It really doesn't have the breath of life of a child. If you don't believe it, just feel it for yourself." Elderwood could not provide any irrefutable evidence, so he could only answer this way. The old magician shook his head even harder. "I'm a magician. You priests can feel the breath of life, but I can't." Two old men who were estimated to be 150 years old in total, one refused to believe it, and the other insisted on his position but could not produce any evidence, arguing endlessly. Gretel stood aside and watched for a long time. When he saw the girl with tears in her eyes, one hand pressing her abdomen, and bending down several times to feel sick, she couldn't help but take a step forward. "Elder, Master, Miss, can you let me use magic to take a look at it? Thanks to @book-eating demon bug for the 500 starting coins, thanks for changing the browser to log in, this does not count as an iOS reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 174. Chapter 174. It's really not pregnancy. What kind of disease is that? Use magic. Can you see magic too? The two old men turned back at the same time. Master Tolga tugged at his beard, glanced at Gretel with a new look, and turned to ask Elderwood. Old Mumu, your student. My friend's student is studying at the Parliament headquarters and asked me to take care of him, Elderwood explained, and then asked Gretel, are you sure? Can magic really be seen? It should be possible. Gretel slowly stepped forward and explained to Elderwood and Master Tolga. It's a new magic. I just improved it. The paper has been reviewed and approved. Let's see if I can get pregnant. It can still be done. As he spoke, he rummaged through his backpack, found the paper, and handed it over with both hands. Master Tolga couldn't wait to grab it, read 10 lines at a glance, and read on quickly. I slowed down as I read. I twirled my beard with my left hand, from the 3-layered chin to the almost white tip of my beard. Let go, move it up, and do it again. Greet waited patiently, without any hint of impatience. It's just waiting for the patient's family to sign. The patient, or the patient's family, is much more troublesome than this. Make a preoperative explanation, tell him once, if he doesn't understand, tell him again, let me think about it, call his relatives and ask about it, take out his mobile phone and Baidu on the spot. In contrast, the family members of patients who are willing to read papers on the spot and try to understand what B ultrasound is are simply adorable. It seems reasonable. After a long time, the old magician finally turned to the last page of the paper and stroked his beard with satisfaction. Let me give it a try. Old Wood, give me a bottle of oil dash. I'd better do it first. Greet didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and quickly stopped him. When I finish reading, I will tell you which parts to pay attention to, and you can take a look again in person dash. After comforting the patient's family, Greet turned around and went to comfort the patient again. Iris burst into tears, grabbing the female knight with one hand and grabbing Gretel's sleeve with the other. I'm really not pregnant, please, prove to me that I really didn't do anything bad, I'm not with any man, woo woo woo. Don't worry, as long as you are indeed not pregnant, this magic will definitely prove it. Gretel comforted her as gently as possible. He said this, but he was not sure at all. A young female suffers from a distended abdomen and denies the history of apricot life. How credible is this statement? God knows. For women of childbearing age, if you have abdominal pain, bloating, or any acute abdominal symptoms, you should not take it seriously if you deny it, and send them all to get HCG. Otherwise, you think it's appendicitis, and you confidently cut it open, and you end up with an ectopic pregnancy. Stupid. Immediately ask the obstetrics and gynecology teacher to help. Then, if you are lucky, you will be scolded by the director. If you are not lucky, your certificate will be torn apart. Of course, this is a different world and there is no HCG to do it. Greet could only be worried, and coaxed people inside while silently chanting, it must not be an ectopic pregnancy, it must not be a teratoma. In spite of his busy schedule, I still want to give Elderwood a smile. Elder, is there any sister who happens to be here? Please come over and accompany me. It's not convenient for me to examine a girl by myself. Freya went to Woodland and won't be back until tomorrow. Anita has gone home. Elderwood hesitated, looked at the old magician, and then at the female knight. How about asking this young lady to accompany you? I have no problem, Selena responded immediately. She returned her hand and patted her female companion's forearm. Don't be afraid, I'm with you. Forget it, I don't have a problem. A male doctor examines a female patient. There are no female nurses. The patient's family members can accompany her. If I can't help, I can't help. I can prove it and I will be grateful. Gretel quickly followed. He found a bed, laid the girl down, and drew the curtains. The female knight stood at the head of the bed. Greed held the female patient's hand and stared into her eyes as gently as possible. "Don't be afraid, this magic will not hurt you or make you feel pain. I will only use one finger on your belly dash." He stood up straight and drew a circle on his abdomen, reaching up to the xiphoid process and the lower edge of the ribs, down to the pelvis, from left to right to the mid-axillary line on the side. "Move back and forth here and take a look with your magic." Iris followed the movement of his fingers, flinched, and tried her best to smile at him. Gretel thoughtfully pretended not to notice her little move, softened her voice, and continued to explain to her. "You may press some in, but not too deep. If it hurts, just tell me. In order for the magic to work smoothly, you need to lift the clothes on your stomach and pour some oil on the skin. It will feel a little yang, please bear with me. Just lie flat on your back. If your belly is bulging, just do it. If you are told to lie on your side, just lie on your side. Don't worry about anything else. I won't touch other places. If you are worried, you can also cover the top and bottom with a blanket, leaving only the belly." His voice was calm and gentle, and his eyes were focused. As Iris listened, the fingers that were holding onto the cloak gradually relaxed, and the edges of her nails became more red. After Greet finished talking about the precautions, just as he was about to stand up, his sleeve suddenly tightened. Iris stood up and held his sleeve tightly with her little hands. I'm really not pregnant, right? Last month, I drank water from his cup. Isn't it, girl?" Greet couldn't laugh or cry for a moment. Forget it, even in the previous life, girls in the 21st century would still make trouble like this, not to mention the level of development here is similar to that of the Middle Ages. He patted the back of the girl's hand comfortingly. "Don't worry, as long as you are really not pregnant, magic will definitely prove it. Madam, please help your friend prepare." "Thank you very much. I will go get the magic materials and come back later. There is a bag of bat brains in the left hand and a bottle of glycerin in the right hand." Greet had just sat down when the curtain behind him was lifted, and Master Tolga and Elder Wood filed in. Greet looked back helplessly. "Elder. The other party is a young girl. Can you guys go out first? You do it, and I'll watch." Elder Wood held the paper in one hand, his eyes burning. The old magician only had one sentence: "I am her father." Okay. Gretel made a gesture, signaling the female knight to lift the blanket on Iris' belly. The girl was lying motionless on her back, with her abdomen bulging upwards centered on her navel. The side abdominal wall did not bulge significantly, and her navel did not protrude either. Greet immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Thank God, the cause of the abdominal distension was not ascites. If this was ascites, he would be dead. It would cause symptoms of ascites, cirrhosis, portal hypertension, heart failure, constrictive pericarditis, peritoneal cancer metastasis, nephrotic syndrome, pancreatogenic peritoneal effusion, tuberculous peritonitis. Which one? They are not to be trifled with. Without a bunch of relevant examinations, he couldn't even identify the disease. Even if the diagnosis was successful, he wouldn't be able to cure it. Greet handed the glycerin to the female knight and motioned her to apply a thick layer on her friend's belly. He held a bat brain and activated the B ultrasound magic. Press the index finger of your right hand on Iris's lower abdomen, and scan the ultrasound near the pelvis, observing carefully. This belly must be 5 or 6 months old. Gretel was extra careful, holding his breath and looking up and down. He thought about the pelvic cavity, mid-abdomen, upper abdomen, and even the possibility of ectopic pregnancy, but was finally sure that there was none. Not even a 3-month-old fetus was found. He had no choice but to do HCG here, so he had to be careful. After searching hard, he finally breathed a sigh of relief and came to the conclusion with confidence. Don't worry, it's not pregnancy. Is it? Let me see. I'll take a look too. Two old men rushed forward quickly. Greet had just shouted, "I haven't finished checking yet," and was already pushed aside and almost fell to the ground. Master Tolga couldn't wait to grab a bat brain. What do you think? Is it enough to emit sound waves in there? Gretel had no choice but to get out of the way. Just take a look. The benefit of being able to use magic is that any magician can learn it and verify it on your own. He nervously reminded the important points. That's right, if you point your finger a little forward and a little further down, it's right here. Activate the magic and you can see that there is no baby in her belly. You can't mistake the baby's appearance, right? By the way, use less magic power. Just be able to see clearly. If the magic power fluctuates too much, your intestines will be broken. Mom. Master Tolga grabbed a bat brain, then another, moving his fingers back and forth, looking at it several times. Finally, he took a long breath, raised his right hand, and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Really not. Rub the glycerin on your fingers onto your forehead, and your forehead, already covered with beads of sweat, immediately becomes shiny and colorful. Gretel didn't dare to laugh. He turned around and paid attention to the old magician with his peripheral vision. He looked at Elderwood with a look full of expectation. Old Moo, you are right. The girl is not pregnant, but sick, so what kind of disease is this? How to treat it? You have watched the girl grow up, you have to cure her. Hey, your daughter is not pregnant, I proved it to you. If you have any questions, ask me. Forget it, if there is a senior director and a resident doctor here, or even if there is a white-haired chief surgeon and a young deputy director, the patient and the patient's family must have gone to the older doctor. 2,800 words. The author works very hard. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, and ask for recommendation votes. Looking for book review. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 175. What's the girl's disease? The old magician and the girl lying on the bed looked at Elderwood with expectant eyes. On the other hand, the female knight Selena stood aside with her sword in hand, her emerald green eyes flickering slightly as she looked at Elderwood, then at Greet. Later, they fell more on Greet. Gretel glanced at her, and Selena nodded slightly at him, with a smile in her eyes. Then, he pointed at the girl on the bed and made a mouth shape silently. A pair of beautiful eyes full of tears, obviously asking, "What disease is it? Do you know?" This, Gretel looked at Elderwood and moved his right foot inconspicuously towards the female knight. Before his left foot could catch up, the elder had already turned around and looked at Gretel with a smile. "Little Greet, what do you think?" Greet opened his mouth to tell the answer. When the words came to his mouth, he paused. "I have some guesses, but whether they are correct or not, I have to check to be sure." "Then check it out." Elderwood smiled and raised his hand. Greet jumped up immediately. "Wait a minute, I'll get pen and paper." Inquiry. Check up. Write a medical record. He held a thick notebook and sat down in front of the girl. When he opened it, he saw that the front was densely packed and half of the notebook had already been memorized. He flipped to the latest page, looked at the girl on the bed, and gave him a smile. "Girl, may I ask your last name?" Manielan. The girl lowered her face and tightened the blanket, her ears red. Gretel coughed, buried his head in writing, and continued to ask. "Age? 17 years old. What's wrong with you?" My belly is getting bigger." "How long? How long has it been since your belly started getting bigger?" Three or 4 months. "Is it so big in the first place?" "Of course not." "Does your stomach hurt?" "A bit." "Does it hurt all the time or does it come and go?" "In a moment." Is it bloated? A little bit. Do you feel like vomiting? How is your bowel movement? Do you have it every day? How much? Do you fart? You. Why do you ask questions about everything? The girl's ears were red, she turned her head inward and ignored him. Greet raised his head helplessly, extended his hand to Elderwood, and continued to write rapidly. 03.12. Iris Mainland, female, 17 years old. The abdomen is distended and progressively worsens over 3 to 4 months, reaching the size of the 6th month of pregnancy. Paroxysmal abdominal pain, abdominal distension, and occasional vomiting. I can't write anymore. He took out another piece of paper, wrote down a lot of questions, looked around, and waved to the female knight. Selina took the paper from his hand, swept it up, and was stunned on the spot. You have to ask all these questions. Ask everyone. Do you really have to ask? The female knight tapped the paper with her slender fingers. What have you eaten? What medicine have you taken in the past few months? Have you been here? Her cheeks turned red. You have to ask. I must ask. Greed put down the pen, clasped his hands together, and bowed to her. Sister, please help me. It's not convenient for me to ask these questions. You are a girl and she is willing to talk to you. Really, the more accurate and detailed the answers, the more accurate I can judge the condition. Okay. Selina took away the paper, smiled half-heartedly, and pointed outside the curtain. Gretel quickly picked up the stool and rolled it up. He consciously avoided the curtain and waved to call out the two elders. He sat down against the curtain with his notebook in his arms, raised his ears, listened to the conversation between the two girls and tried to record. Loss of appetite, weight loss, constipation, and a small amount of flatulence. I underwent magical treatment 5 days ago, but there is no improvement. What the hell is this medical record? If you put it back, people will laugh to death. Complaints are complaints, but records should still be recorded. Thank God, this is an outpatient clinic. Greed took it upon himself to classify the patient as an outpatient clinic, so there is no need to write medical records in the inpatient format. Otherwise, just 2 or 3 pieces of paper would not be enough to write the admission record. Behind the admission record, there are also disease course records, consent forms, various record documents and report sheets, each of which can be found in a thick stack. Added together, it must be as thick as the notebook in his hand. There were whispers in the curtain for a while, and then the female knight opened the curtain and came out, her cheeks slightly red, and she threw the paper into his hand. Gretel hurriedly scanned it and saw that it was similar to what he had dictated. He only added a few sentences before closing the book and walking to the old magician. I've asked all the questions I need to ask about the young lady's condition. Next, I need to do some tests on her. May I touch her body? It must be like this, Elderwood asked eagerly. Greet nodded helplessly. It must be like this. I have to verify something, not rely on eyesight, ears, hearing, divine magic or magic detection, but must touch and press with hands. This is how treating a female patient is like, palpation and other normal methods in medical diagnosis and treatment, and the consent of the parents and the patient must be obtained first. Greet sighed secretly. If possible, he didn't want to cause such trouble, but the patient was right in front of him, and it was impossible for him to give up diagnosis and treatment. Can you cure it? Master Tolga pondered for a moment and did not answer. Instead, he asked Elderwood. The elder lowered his head and thought for a while. I'm not very sure. I treated someone whose belly was smaller than hers before. I thought it was fine, but suddenly she died of abdominal pain for some reason. Besides, he glanced sideways at Greet. This child's treatment ideas and methods are different from my magic. Frankly speaking, I am also looking forward to his method. Master Tolga looked at the motionless curtain, then at Elderwood, lowering his head in thought. Elderwood avoided his gaze and muttered quietly as if talking to himself. "It's not like I haven't touched you just now." "That's it," the old magician immediately made up his mind. He opened the curtain, pushed Gretel in, and personally brought him to his daughter. "Iris, don't be afraid, let the priest look at it again. Just touch and press it a few times with your hands, it doesn't matter, it won't hurt." "I." The girl's snow-white cheeks had turned red, and even the roots of her ears were red. She lowered her head and clutched the blanket tightly. It wasn't until her father pushed her 2 or 3 times that she let out a hum sound like a mosquito. "Gretel. This won't work. Even though you are shy, you can't help but let me see you during the inspection. Miss, please raise your head a little and let me see your face. Well, I'll just look at your eyes. No, your face is so red that you can't tell whether it's yellow or not." Thank God, the whites of my eyes were not red at the same time. Greet tried hard to recall the skin he had seen before, and wrote, "The skin and sclera are not jaundiced very good, liver lesions have been roughly ruled out, and the treatment pressure has been reduced by more than half. Next, start palpating." He waved the female knight out, lowered his voice and whispered, "Will you accompany her to the bathroom first?" He also dragged the female knight into accompany and testify, and in a soft voice explained to the girl what was to be done next. Then he rubbed his hands together and lifted the blanket. "Physical examination, begin." Greet tried hard to control his expression so that he looked serious, yet gentle and kind. He lifted the blanket on the girl's abdomen, carefully observed and measured her abdominal circumference, and then, "Miss, sit up and let me take a look. Slowly, just sit upright." "Okay, lie down." "Why do you make her sit and lie down?" Elderwood asked from behind. Gretel simply handed him the pen and paper. "Elder, please help me record it." Note, the entire abdomen is distended, the abdomen is spherical, and the shape does not change significantly when moving. Elderwood frowned and wrote slowly. In just one sentence, there were 2 words that he was not very familiar with, so he had to think carefully about how to write them. Gretel's explanation has caught up. When you sit up or lie down, the shape of the bulging belly does not change significantly, which means that the bulging thing is hard, not soft, especially not water. If it is water, it will flow to both sides when you lie down. A puddle. Come on, exhale, inhale, exhale again, inhale again. Remember, the bulge does not move with breathing. It means it is not caused by organs or masses under the diaphragm. Every time he asked the patient to do an action, he would explain the reason, which made Iris' face turn pale and red, then red and white again. The female knight pressed her friend's shoulder beside her and whispered, "There are so many things to consider." "It's not just that much to consider," Greet smiled faintly. Belly enlargement, medically known as abdominal distension, is divided into global abdominal distension and partial abdominal distension. Just for total abdominal distension, there are 3 causes: abdominal effusion, ascites, abdominal gas, and huge mass. Ascites has 3 major categories and 15 subcategories, with at least 70 or 80 causes. Even if the cause of the disease is finally determined, a large number of auxiliary examinations must be relied upon. Before these examinations are prescribed, a doctor's physical examination must be conducted to guide the initial direction. There are no varicose veins in the abdominal wall, and there are no abnormalities in the abdominal skin grate. The possibility of intestinal strangulation is a little smaller. Possibility of surgery downward arrow downward arrow. "Have you finished checking?" the old magician asked anxiously. Greet took a deep breath. "It's almost time." "Elder, come and see, there are long strips of protrusions on her belly, around her navel, right?" She bent down and saw it very clearly from the side. "Okay, just pat it gently." After the gentle patting, the long bulges on the snow-white, high bulging belly kept squirming, rising, and falling one after another. Some are forward, some are backward, in different directions. Iris moaned softly, "It hurts." "It'll be fine soon, just be patient," Greet comforted softly. The old magician said in surprise behind him. "What's this?" "This is the intestines, or rather, this is what is blocking the lady's intestines and making her belly bloated so big," Gretel explained confidently. He looked back at Elderwood and gestured with his hands. "Remember, you can see the multi-layered trapezoidal intestinal pattern and peristaltic waves. Elder, do you have a long empty tube here? I want to listen to the bowel sounds. Damn it, I didn't bring a stethoscope." "I'll have someone look for it." Elderwood put down the pen and paper, got up and was about to go out. Master Tolga grabbed him. "Why do you need so much trouble?" "I'll do it." He stretched out his hands and pulled at the void. A straight round tube immediately appeared in the air, hollow, translucent, and about the thickness of a hand. Gretel said, "Ah! Magic trick. This is void shaping using magic tricks. How could he not have thought of this before?" "That's right, although he can't make a stethoscope, he can still make one with a round tube. The magic trick is an apprentice-level magic. You can throw dozens of them a day, and the consumption is almost negligible." He thanked him, took the stethoscope, and put it to his ear. Pressing one end on Iris's abdomen, her face immediately became serious, breathing evenly, and listening attentively. "Flex the 5 fingers of your free left hand and count one by one. Remember, abdominal pain is accompanied by high-pitched bowel sounds, which sound like metal. Bowel sounds can reach more than 10 times per minute, and the sound is loud, hyperbowel sounds. At this point in the physical examination, the symptoms have been basically confirmed." Greet still didn't dare to be careless. He pressed carefully from the liver and spleen downwards to make sure there were no other lesions before getting up and washing his hands. The old magician followed beside him and asked anxiously, "It's just a blocked intestine, right? Give her some laxatives to clear it up, right? It's not that easy." Gretel gave him a speechless look. Mechanical intestinal obstruction is confirmed, but where is the obstruction? Is it complete intestinal obstruction or partial obstruction? Simple or strangulating? Do you have volvulus? Intussusception? Intestinal perforation? Besides, intestinal obstruction is not necessarily caused by constipation. It can be cured by taking some laxatives. What if it is a foreign body? Is it gallstones? Is it a tumor? Even taking laxatives is useless. He stretched out his hand to Elderwood. "Elder, please lend me your oak staff." "Are you going to use detection magic again?" Elderwood handed over the oak staff with a smile, moved behind Gretel, released the spell, and opened the meditation field. Soon, he frowned and his eyes were blank. "What are you looking at?" The old magician frowned even more than the elder. Greet shrugged, "I definitely can't understand it. I don't understand the structure of the human body, I haven't studied medical imaging, and I don't know what to look at when the film is placed in front of me. Not to mention laymen, even novice doctors need to study for a year or two and watch hundreds or thousands of films before they can understand it." He turned the page and sketched the pictures he saw in his meditation vision. "First, take a lying flat picture, then let Iris stand up, activate detection magic for the second time, and then draw an upright flat picture. Relying on the skills accumulated from years of drawing and explaining to patients, the outline of the body, bones, organs, intestines, etc., quickly appeared on the paper. The advantage of magic is that what you see is what you get. A healer can handle everything from examination to treatment by himself, and there is no need for the patient to queue up for X-rays. The bad thing is that as soon as the magic ends, the images in the meditation field disappear immediately. There is no way to preserve the image other than drawing it on the spot. Hey, if conditions permit in the future, we still have to get an X-ray machine. After taking 2 plain X-rays, let's call them X-rays, then take a B ultrasound image. After all was completed, Gretel spread out the 3 pictures and explained to the patient and his family. You see, this is a lying flat film. You can see the intestines. Is it thicker than the one next to it? This is where the intestines are blocked. Here and here, the places with different brightness are small intestinal gas accumulation. Looking at the standing position again, one ring after another, arranged upward like a ladder, this is the liquid gas plane. There are some clustered images here. The clusters are very large, exceeding. Gretel gestured with his hand, 10 centimeters in diameter. Combined with what the elder said before, I feel a lot of messy life breath, I feel. The 2 old men looked at the mosquito repellent coils. Elderwood was still trying to identify, remember, and recite, but Master Tolga had already grabbed him with one hand and Gretel with the other. Steam was steaming from his forehead, almost smoking. Then how to treat it? Thanks to @Red Comet Mars for the 10,000 starting coins. Additional updates will arrive today. Thanks to the boss for logging in through the browser, so that the reward will not be displayed as an iOS system channel. Thanks I never knew what I should change my name to reward 1000 starting coins. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, and ask for recommendation votes. Please review the book. Yesterday, several readers guessed correctly that it was parasites, but medical diagnosis is not that simple. There's still a lot to consider. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 176. From the beginning of the consultation, Gretel kept thinking about how to treat it. Up to now, after consultation, palpation, auscultation and the magic of X-ray and B ultrasound, the diagnosis has been basically clear: roundworm mechanical intestinal obstruction, simple incomplete obstruction, and, of course, it is chronic. As long as it is acute, the girl will not be able to last until this point. Generally speaking, this kind of disease is handled by the gastroenterology department, and even if you come to the emergency department, it is a matter of emergency medicine. Only if there is strangulation, perforation, or necrosis, will the patient cry out and be pushed to the emergency surgery department for an operation. What have you been doing? But, this is a different world. There are no infusions, no intubations, and no drugs. Greet assessed the degree of intestinal obstruction in his mind, analyzed it piece by piece, sorted out the possible development, complications, and treatment options after conservative treatment, and turned to Elderwood. Elder, if it were you, how would you treat it? I am not completely sure. Elderwood frowned again and again, thought for a while, and shook his head. The main reason for this girl's abdominal distension is that there are bad things in her stomach, the messy life signals that you just pointed out. If it were me, I would use magic and medicine to kill these. Then she used pain relief, warmth, and massage on her belly to let her expel it on her own. But her belly was so bulging. After thinking for a moment, he continued to shake his head. It's very possible that, like the previous patient, he would have severe stomach pain and die if he couldn't survive it. The more Iris listened, the paler her face became. The little face that had been flushed when Greet had touched her just now had no color at all now. The slender fingers tightly tugged on the sleeves of the female knight, shaking her head desperately, and said in a thin voice, "Sister, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, weev. Selina held her and coaxed her softly. The old magician looked at his daughter and then at Elderwood. He was embarrassed again and again. He could only put his hope in Gretel. What if it was you? If it were me dash. Gretel already had a complete plan, and after listening to Elderwood's treatment plan, he made partial modifications. He opened his notebook, drew a diagram of abdominal anatomy, and began to explain. "Elder, Master Tolga, please take a look. The main condition of the young lady is that many insects are tangled together and blocked here dash." He smeared several black lumps on the lower part of the ilium. "The main thing is that this area is not completely blocked, but it is already very blocked. If I were to treat it, I would first do gastrointestinal decompression and enema, that is, remove the contents of the stomach from above and from below. The things are guided out partially to give the intestines a place to move, and then magic is used to kill the insects." The elder just said that it is definitely right to use magic combined with medicine to kill bugs, but if the magic is a little biased or the medicine is too large, will it hurt the intestines at the same time? Elderwood lowered his head and pondered. "It is possible. Just keep talking." "Yes. Before, I couldn't see clearly where the blockage was through my stomach, and the magic might be wrong. But now that we have detection magic, is it possible to determine the location of the operation under the guidance of magic, and try to avoid hurting the intestines?" "It's possible." Elderwood's eyes lit up and he thought about it carefully. Gretel turned to the old magician again. "You see, her belly is so swollen, it means that it is severely blocked. The intestines are like a balloon and have been pushed very thin. After the magical treatment, if the bugs gather, struggle, or scurry around, it is easy to break these places. Or even if it is not punctured, if the puncture is too serious, there will be a section of the intestines that is ischemic, and then death will occur. If I were the one to treat it, if I encountered this situation, I would have to cut open the stomach quickly, take out the blockage in the intestines, and then heal the intestines. If you are very unlucky, a section of your intestines will be cut off." "Isn't that man dead?" Master Tolga blurted out. Greet shook his head slightly, looking confident. "As long as the magic can stop the pain and prevent the lady from feeling pain when the stomach is opened, I am 70% sure to save the lady's life." "Only 70%, the old magician looked disappointed. "Then there is still 30%. "There are still 30%, Gretel was silent for a moment, and then took out another piece of paper. "Wait a minute. Brush, 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 brush. Informed consent form for intestinal obstruction surgery. I write it as I think about it, and try to replace the medical terms involved with words that ordinary people can understand. Just for the risks of surgery, there are 20 or 30 articles. During the operation, the surgical method is changed due to variations in anatomical location and relationships. Injury to nerves, blood vessels and adjacent organs during the operation, such as gallbladder, stomach, liver, pancreas, etc. Postoperative peritonitis, abdominal abscess. Arrhythmia, myocardial infarction, heart failure, cardiac arrest. It is a full piece of paper. The first half is an introduction to the disease, treatment suggestions and alternatives, and the second half is risk information." After finishing writing on a full piece of paper, when Master Tolga took it into his hand, his whole face turned dark. "Are there so many risks?" He shook the notice, almost sticking the paper to Gretel's face. "If you open your stomach, so many things will happen. It should be said that these situations may occur," Gretel patiently explained to the old magician, as he had done countless preoperative conversations in his previous life. "Read it carefully. If you have any questions, you can ask me. If you understand everything and accept it, please sign here. If you need a cesarean section, I can perform the surgery at any time. If you don't sign, you won't have a cesarean section." Gretel shook his head firmly. "If you don't sign, there will be no surgery. This is the rule. Don't worry, even if you don't sign, I will try my best to assist the elders in the early stage of treatment." The old magician used his fingers to grasp the notice so tightly that he almost dug out several holes. He looked around, sometimes looking at his daughter's pale face, sometimes at Elderwood's frowning eyebrows, and finally sighed. Then, let's get treatment first. We'll talk about signing and other matters when we need to have a cesarean section. Okay, I'll do it. Elderwood stood up with an oak staff. He turned his head and looked at Gretel. You just said you wanted to do that, gastrointestinal decompression? How to do it? Greet smiled awkwardly. In the previous life, gastrointestinal decompression was nothing more than inserting a gastric tube and then using negative pressure suction to suck out the contents. This kind of operation can be done by a nurse. The doctor can only give an order and look back to see the effect. The problem is that in this alien world, there is no gastric tube, no negative pressure suction device, and of course, no nurses. That, Elder, Master Tolga, may need your divine and magical help. Thank you at Yamengbing for the 11,784 starting coins. I will pay back your 10,000 reward tomorrow. Thanks to at Xiaoatan for the 588 book coins. Please subscribe, please monthly tickets, please recommend tickets. Monthly tickets and recommended tickets have been down for several days. And please review the book. Book Club Group Number, 649136249. Everyone is welcome to chat together. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 177. Grow a hollow vine, half as thin as your little finger. Are there any thin metal wires? The kind that are as thick as hair? Master Tolga, you can actually use silver coins to shape shapes on the spot. It's so powerful. Okay, very good, let the silver wire wrap around the vines to indicate the position. Detect magic turn on again. Elderwood sat opposite the girl, and Gretel stood behind him, giving instructions and secretly making a V sign in his mind. Inserting a stomach tube with a vine or something, the elder really agreed and didn't make it difficult for him. Very good, I know that after the last bronchoscopy, the teacher wrote a letter to show off, and Elderwood also practiced it secretly. Of course, commanding still requires commanding. Gastroscopy is different from bronchoscopy, and many operating procedures are different. Greet kept talking and gesticulating. Miss, please lie down on the pillow, raise your head, put your chin on your chest, and stay still. Put a pillow behind you, that's great. Elder, you temporarily use magic to make her throat lose feeling. The vines are inserted through the nostrils, grow into the mouth, and then enter the esophagus along the throat. As instructions came into her ears, Iris showed fear and struggled subconsciously. The female knight pressed her friend's shoulder with one hand and tried to fix her head with the other, raising her face and staring at Gretel. His green eyes were as full as water, half puzzled and half pleading. Greet sighed secretly. He took a step forward and tried to comfort the patient. Miss, don't be afraid. We just explained it, didn't we? This vine is very thin, much thinner than your throat. As long as you don't move around, you will definitely not be bruised. Be obedient and lie down. Move. After soothing her several times, Iris's tense body relaxed. Greet leaned over to look at her and smiled slightly. Come on, open your mouth and say it with me. Ah. Iris opened her mouth. Elderwood took the opportunity to activate the vine, and with a whooshing sound, it penetrated the patient's nostrils, snaked downwards, and entered the stomach. Gretel looked at the position of the silver wire in his meditation vision, and saw that the end had reached near the xiphoid process, and quickly shouted. Okay, okay. Stop. Gastric tube insertion under X-ray guidance is so luxurious. Greet let out a long sigh. In the previous life, everyone performed blind insertion. X-ray radiation is harmful to the human body. It was just a gastric tube inserted, and it was absolutely impossible to use it for guidance. Now that I have used magic detection, It feels much more convenient. He took the vine, put one hand close to the girl's face, and held it firmly. He handed it to the old magician with one hand. Master Tolga, please drive the wind element and pump out the air from the vines. Don't do it too fast. After pumping out, the contents of the stomach will pour out. Please continue to guide the liquid. Don't stop until I tell you to stop. No problem. Leave it to me. The old magician took it easily. Gretel smiled to himself. Isn't it just negative pressure attraction? There was no suction device, no 50 ml syringe, and no priest from the spring water temple, but I still caught someone else. The methods are all people think of, hum. One end of the vine hissed. Gretel put his fingertips next to the entrance. First he felt the invisible whirlwind sucking the air, and then he saw the dripping sound of transparent, slightly viscous liquid coming out. Gretel took a cup and observed it carefully. First there are stomach contents, and soon after, putrefactive and fermented intestinal contents begin to appear. The stench hit her face. Selena covered her nose and stepped aside. What are you looking at so fascinated? Thank God, there was no bleeding. Gretel stared at the cup without looking up. As for the fact that roundworms were indeed found in the food scraps, I won't say it's disgusting. The female knight was stunned for a moment and sighed softly. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Greet responded vaguely. He looked at the capacity in the cup for a while, then looked at the speed and state of the contents of the stomach pouring out, and suddenly shouted. Stop. The amount that has been extracted is almost the same, and the bottom of the gastric tube is beginning to become clogged. It can be stopped. The gastrointestinal decompression is completed and the enema is completed. After all the preparations were completed, Elderwood held the pill in his hand and hesitated. This medicine can only kill 60 to 70% of those life breaths at most, including divine magic. It can only kill 90% at most. Little Greet, what else can you do? Method. In this other world, where can I find pagoda, albendazole, and mebendazole for you? There is no place to look for triptorigium vine and gentlemen. I still remember the prescription for Wume pills, but asarum, coptis, aconite, ginseng, etc., should I look forward to a drugstore across time and space, or should I look forward to a Dobeo place where I can place an order? Greet desperately searched for the paper in his mind. Orally taking vegetable oil is lubricating, taking honey and ginger orally, the insecticidal effect is probably not as good as Elderwood's pills. Rhubarb chinky decoction? Ding Gyson? Wake up, there is no Chinese medicine here. As an emergency surgery doctor, why should I use my brain as a gastroenterologist? Even in my previous life, the work of conservative treatment was done by internal medicine. Gretel whined, and whined again. He was so sad that he actually had an idea and took out the remaining tube of potassium permanganate from his pocket. Elder, what you did last time, gather the same gas as in the test tube and pour it into the bubble technique, can you use that magic again? No problem, Elderwood agreed, I have simplified that magical technique, and it can be used as long as it is level 5. Hey, you will be promoted to level 5 soon, and I will teach you. This and that, water from a distance can't quench the thirst of the near, but fortunately, it's enough if there is someone on site who can use it. Gretel raised a finger. What I want this time is not just a bubble technique, but filling it with bubbles and sending it into the stomach through the vines, or preferably, into the intestines. Can it be done? This. Elderwood hesitated. It's probably okay to put the vines into the intestines, it's just to let them grow on their own. I can't control the bubbles to shrink. No. I can't do it either. Although I can do the bubble technique, my magic control is not that good. But it doesn't matter, just get a rubber ball. Oh, the emergency department calls it a rubber ball, but it's actually an oxygen supplying airbag. Any substitute for this thing will do. Fish bladders, pig urine, etc. are filled with oxygen and put on the vines, just squeeze them with your hands. Gretel was already looking around for a replacement. The old magician calmly interjected. I can. Hey, someone took the initiative to sign up as a coolie. Greet clapped his hands. Great. You guys try to cooperate first and use bubbles and vines to inflate the water basin. I'll come as soon as I go. Elder, are there any alchemy tools here? The two old men joined forces to cast spells. Once, twice, 3 times, it was finally smoothed until there were no flaws. Greet also completed the work of heating potassium permanganate and producing oxygen, and brought over a tube of oxygen. Then, first insert the tube, then summon the gas and use bubble technique to send it into the body. Wait for a while, and you will see the effect. He ran in and out too fast, and his tone was too confident. The old magician didn't even have time to ask questions, let alone ask what kind of gas is it, or is it dangerous to put it into my daughter's body. Elderwood thought for a moment, then shook his head and retorted. Didn't you say last time that that gas improves the vitality of the human body? If you put it in like this, if the bugs start to make trouble. But that bug is afraid of this kind of gas. Greet blinked and laughed. Elderwood was really quick in his reactions and could draw inferences from one instance to other cases. He actually gave him an idea of the effect of oxygen on the human body. However, roundworms are anaerobic. You think about it, these bugs live in the intestines. There is not much air in that place. They have long been used to it. There are a lot of them at once, just like ice wolves with thick fur in the desert. They have to stay alive. Die. Mom. Elderwood thought for a while, nodded, and approved Greet's plan. Master Tolga was still a little hesitant. What kind of gas are you talking about? Will it hurt my daughter? Definitely not, Elderwood assured him. I used this gas once, to an adventurer who was out of breath and about to die. The guy relied on it to survive. Don't worry, it was gathered from the air. Nothing will happen to him. He will be fine. There are benefits. So what is it? I don't know, this person's unique secret method. Elderwood spread his hands. A unique secret technique. Did it happen by chance, or was it some kind of nook and cranny? Master Tolga looked at Gretel with some suspicion. Her eyes wandered over his young and confident face, and then fell on his chest, the mage badge with a dark background and a copper star and a circle. A first-level magician. First-level arcanist. At this level, a paper has been published in Arcane. That gas is your unique secret method. It doesn't count. Greet smiled modestly, that is already present in the air. I just proved its existence and roughly measured the content after thinking about it, he added. The white flames you saw before were made of this gas as a casting material. That's all I can say. Could it be that I told you it's oxygen? Even if you write down the molecular formula, you don't even know it. Oh, the old magician was moved. With the power of a mere first-level magician, he could actually resist the ice giant for a moment. He was really impressed by that spell. It's just someone else's unique spell. He didn't have the nerve to ask at that time. That white fire, I saw your spell-casting gesture, it turned out to be burning hands. It's just the burning hand, but the casting materials have been changed. The effect is outstanding. What's changed? That's an increase. Burning hands has no casting materials, so what's the increase? Master Tolga blurted out. Greet lowered his head slightly, with a smile on his lips, but did not refute. The old magician thought for a while and then asked. Do you have a paper? It hasn't been published yet. Who is your teacher? I'm studying at the Mage Tower in Heartland City, and I'm currently in the training class of the Magic Council. Oh, he is a good and qualified young man, and he has not yet been trapped in his own home. Master Tolga once again looked deeply at Gretel and looked at the test tube in his hand. What is this gas? Can you let me try it? This is the only one left. I didn't bring enough materials, so I only made this one. Greet spread his hands. The old magician hesitated for a moment. Between not asking about other people's magic and his daughter's life, he chose his daughter in the end. He dug into the sleeves of his robe, took out a small silver bell, placed it on the table, and pushed it towards Greet. Sorry, what material is it? Potassium permanganate. Ah, no, what is it called here? Master Lin An mentioned it once, by the way. Purple scale stone. His eyes lit up, and he was filled with joy that he finally remembered, and the corners of his mouth turned up. The old magician immediately looked at Elderwood, who shook his head. No. There is really nothing we can do if we don't have it, Master Tolga sighed. Seeing that Gretel didn't even look at the bell on the table, he simply picked it up and put it into Gretel's hand. Then use your method. Please. Two old men and one young man join forces once again. Elderwood is responsible for the vines and summoning gas, and Master Tolga is responsible for controlling the bubble and making it slowly shrink. Gretel was responsible for shouting next to him. Slow down. Slow down. Don't shrink the bubble so fast. If you hit it too fast, your intestines will burst. Slow down. 500 ml of oxygen, even if it is not pure oxygen, it is air containing high concentration of oxygen, is slowly pumped into the intestines. Theoretically, oxygen can be given at a rate of 5 L/min, but that is a vine, not a gastrointestinal endoscope, and the conditions inside the intestines cannot be seen. Greet was really afraid that the vine exit would be in the wrong direction and spray directly on the intestinal wall, causing a perforation or something. When the time comes to perform surgery to replenish the intestines, not only will it be troublesome, but there will also be a lot of complications and sequelae. Alas, it is better to be slow than fast. Anyway, it is not a big deal to have more oxygen in the gastrointestinal tract. Even if the intestinal wall absorbs oxygen, it will only absorb a very small amount at most. Woohoo, when will I be able to develop a magic or divine skill and use it as a telescope? Gretel added another item to his list of needs and watched the old magician deliver oxygen little by little at his greeting. In less than 10 seconds, the painful look on Iris's face had softened visibly. I don't feel any pain anymore. Lie down. Lie down, Gretel jumped up and held her down. Don't drop the gastric tube. After the oxygen was given, the stomach tube was pulled out, or the stomach tube retracted on its own. After another 15 minutes or so, Elderwood activated his magic and detected the breath of life. Under the illumination of the spiritual light, he immediately said, "Hey. They are almost dead. Little Greet, the effect of your gas is much better than the pills. The stomach is also a bit flat and not so bulging. That is." Greet clapped his hands with a relaxed expression, as if he had been working hard all day and wanted to brush away the unnecessary dust. The delivery of oxygen through the gastrointestinal tract for Dwarming has been confirmed by many cases and papers. Especially for biliary ascariasis, when the patient is in excruciating pain, a gastroscope is inserted to give oxygen for a few seconds. The effect is immediate. The patient felt no pain on the spot and immediately reviewed the B ultrasound and found that the roundworms had been eliminated. As for my belly not being so bulging anymore. Adult insects will stop clumping together when they are dead. If they spread out, their stomachs will be flatter. The treatment is very effective. Next, expel the dead bugs and the disease will be cured. Another 4,000-word chapter. Mum. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, and ask for recommendation votes. Everyone must work hard on Monday. Also, many people have not thought of using oxygen to kill roundworms. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 178. Kills roundworms. Apply hot compress, massage the abdomen, keep warm, and promote intestinal peristalsis. Drink medicine. This is the trilogy of treatments for roundworms. The first step has been completed, and Elderwood is personally doing the second step. Seeing that the patient's symptoms are temporarily relieved, Greet sneaks into the kitchen and starts preparing the potion. He lit a fire, fanned the stove, and heated a bowl of soybean oil. Take the boiling soybean oil away from the fire, squat in front of the table, and throw magic into it one by one. Freezing ray, freezing ray, freezing ray. What are you doing? Freeze yet. When Greet was distracted, the freezing ray missed slightly. Like cold water dripping into a frying pan, the hot soybean oil burst into bubbles and exploded on the spot. Gretel groaned and leaned back. It was too late to lift the table as a cover. He set up the shield spell. Forgive him that this magic was not instantaneous, there were no other shields around, not even a pot lid. He had no choice but to summon a mage's hand, try his best to flatten the thing, put it in front of his eyes, and then crossed his arms to cover his face. Well. A sigh came from behind. Silently, translucent light flashed in front of his eyes, turning into an indestructible arc-shaped force field. Drops of hot oil rose up, retreated, and returned to the pan, and Gretel himself was firmly supported by a pair of hands, preventing him from falling backwards. When he touched his hand, he found it was smooth, neither cold nor hot, and had no wrist. If it were a guy with a slower response, he would have jumped up and shouted at this time. Ghost! Gretel didn't yell. The hand of a mage is not a rare thing, so it is nothing worth making a fuss about. He stood up straight calmly, turned around, and bowed slightly to the back. Master, I'm making the medicine that the lady will drink later. Is this what it is? The old magician was curious. If Gretel was busy in the alchemy room, he was more convinced that the problem was in the kitchen. There was a stove, a pot of soybean oil, and 2 onions on the cutting board next to it. The kitchen knife was not placed on the table, and I don't know if this kid planned to cut until tears burst into his face. Is this the medicine you're talking about? Yes, Greet explained to him confidently. Vegetable oil is soothing and laxative, which can help the contents of the intestines to be discharged quickly. Onion juice can speed up intestinal peristalsis. As for heating it, I am afraid that there are bad things in the raw soybean oil. Once it is cooked, it doesn't matter. Then what? The old magician said with a smile in his eyes. You just wanted it to cool down quickly? And it exploded. That's right. Greet, it's just some soybean oil. How can you fry it? Elderwood also walked in slowly and joined in the ridicule. Gretel blushed. I'm making potions, alchemy, can the magician's thing be considered a blow-up? What followed was a series of small murmurs, such as I am not a pharmacy major and there is no refrigerator, which caused the 2 old men to look at each other, shake their heads and laugh. The female knights outside the door all laughed, and the air inside and outside the kitchen was filled with joy. Master Tolga smiled and raised his hand. A 2-foot-tall ice tornado was formed out of thin air, rolling in the hot soybean oil drop by drop. The wind and frost sword rotated at high speed, and Gretel only had time to shout from the side. As long as it's warm. Not cold. Just warm. With a splash, the soybean oil fell into the bowl on the side, crystal clear and without a drop of water. Gretel took a small spoonful and tasted it. Sure enough, it was only warm. He looked at the old magician enviously. It's great to have magic. Cool down. Separate. Purify. It can be used as a centrifuge. He hasn't even used the centrifuge yet. What's next? The old magician stopped and looked at him and asked. Gretel quickly came to his senses, slice the onions, squeeze the juice, Mix the juice and soybean oil evenly, and then dash. Then, the wind blade flew up and cut the onion into slices less than 1 millimeter thick. The two magician hands picked up the onion slices, folding them together, twisting them, and the spicy juice dripped into the oil bowl. From the beginning to the end, the old magician was at least 3 meters away from the onions, and the choking smell could not smell him at all. But a moment later, Miss Iris was holding the oil bowl with tears streaming down her face. "Do you have to drink it? Drink quickly. You won't choke if you drink it." With tears in her eyes, Iris drank it all in one gulp. The female knight took the bowl in her hand and immediately waved to Gretel, pretending to drive him away. "Get out. Let the girl have a good rest." "Alas, isn't it just that I'm afraid that I have to go to the toilet immediately after drinking oil?" Gretel shook his head, pulled up the stool, and sat down in front of the bed. Not only that, he also snatched Elderwood's oak staff and put it upright on the side of the bed. "Don't worry, it won't be that soon. At least it won't be until around dinner. I'll watch here for a while. If your stomach hurts, you must tell me." Well, while cooking soybean oil, he searched for relevant papers in his memory. In the case of intestinal obstruction, taking the scallion oil mixture will usually cause exhaust and defecation within 6 hours, and a large number of roundworms will be excreted within 12 hours. Do you have to have a bowel movement just after drinking oil? Not so fast. Iris's face turned even redder when he said that, so she simply pulled up the thin blanket and covered herself with a hood. The female knight looked at her friend who was huddled up in a ball, and then at the old magician who was sitting nearby with no intention of stopping her. She couldn't help but sigh. "Since it's not so fast, why do you have to stay here? Iris will be shy." "I don't want to stay here either. I also want to go out and practice magic and write papers, but if that doesn't work, it's also good to spend time meditating. But with such a severe intestinal obstruction, anything may happen before it heals." Gretel thought for a while, then activated a magic trick, and the void formed a hose, with something specially blocked in it. You see, the human intestines are like this long tube. Now there are a lot of things blocked in the tube dash. He pushed down with his hand to make the hose bulge a large piece, and explained to the female knight, the old magician and Elderwood. "I just took the medicine, and my intestines have the strength on their own. It may be able to expel the things smoothly, or there may be too much accumulation in one section, and the intestines have no strength to push it, and the accumulation will accumulate, or it may simply cause perforation. I stay here just in case. If she has severe stomach pain, I can judge in time what the situation is and whether she needs treatment. Intestinal strangulation, intussusception, and intestinal perforation can all be determined using X-ray images." He stayed here without leaving, his oak staff placed behind the patient, ready to activate his magic at any time if something unusual appeared. Alas, in addition to these risks, intestinal ischemia is also very troublesome. However, intestinal ischemia can only be seen by CT with his current ability. CT is not possible. Life is not full of hardships. After winning long, I returned to Shu. After having a B ultrasound, I immediately wanted to do better. There are also dehydration, acid-base balance disorders, etc. If you are not watching from the side, you will always feel uneasy. Can you really tell? Elderwood came over after hearing this, looked at the patient on the bed, looked at Greet, and asked seriously. "Just use your detection magic." "Really?" Elder Greet turned back. "I'll draw it for you to see what happens and what you can see in your meditation field of vision. You can compare it with the drawing later. Of course, it's best not to show up." Accident. He immersed himself in drawing pictures all afternoon, including intestinal obstruction, intestinal strangulation, intussusception, intestinal perforation, X-rays of upright plane films, lying plane films, B ultrasound images, and anatomical diagrams of corresponding situations, one by one. Zhang told Elder Wood. The old magician only listened to a few words and then got up and went out. Selena persisted until the second picture and then left the room covering her mouth. Only the miserable Elder Wood is left. At such an old age, he still has to memorize these images one by one, and his eyes are almost like mosquito coils. They continued talking until after dinner, and after a while, a series of popping sounds suddenly sounded under the blanket. Iris's cheeks turned from white to red, and then from red to white, and her body trembled. Greet jumped up and called the female knight in. "That's almost it? I'll leave the rest to you. If you have any questions, call me anytime. Thanks to @origami and Gart for the 100 starting coins. Thanks to @Muya for the 100 book coins. Another 2,400 word chapter. If I can write more, the author always strives to write more. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. It's Monday and subscriptions are so bleak. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 179. Ascaricidal intestinal obstruction. Gastrointestinal decompression and 500 ml warm saline enema were given. About 500 ml of oxygen was injected through the gastric tube. Greet circled the word, feeling very guilty, and the patient's pain was immediately relieved. After 15 minutes, I used magical observation to confirm that the roundworms were basically dead. After 30 minutes, give 200 ml of soybean oil, add about 200 g of onion, squeeze the juice, mix well and take it orally. Watch closely. Exhaustion and defecation in the anus occurred after 5.5 hours. Gretel put the last stroke on the medical record, stood up straight, and stretched. This patient is finally cured. Speaking of which, this time it went quite smoothly, there were no accidents, and the informed consent form for the surgery was not used. Of course, from a doctor's point of view, it is best not to use it. Not only that, he also gained a little more. By the way, what is that bell for? Gretel dug, and took out the bell given by the old magician from his pocket, looking up and down. The silver-white bell-shaped bell is a little over 3 centimeters in height and 2.5 centimeters in diameter, with a bell tongue hanging in the middle. Gretel took it in his hand and shook it. The tongue seemed to be cast inside the bell, motionless and not ringing at all. It seems that's not how it is used. Greet took it closer to observe. The bell was engraved with fine patterns. Looking carefully, it was a magic word written in cursive script. He identified each word and read it out unknowingly. Everything in the past is, all is, all is. I couldn't pronounce the last word. There were gentle footsteps behind him, and someone walked up to him, and an old voice prompted. Illusory. Everything in the past is an illusion, Gretel immediately repeated it. The bell jingled, and a wisp of smoke came out from the opening of the bell. The lower half was still inside, but the upper half had condensed into a human shape. He leaned on the edge and shouted. Who is it? I was reciting a spell and was still hesitating. I stretched my head halfway and then retracted it again. Excuse me? Greet almost blurted out, but at the last moment, he would hold back. He looked carefully and saw that the guy emerging from the bell was not big. His upper body was only about a foot tall, and his total height was estimated to be no more than 2 feet. He has green skin, blue hair, a high nose, and pointed ears. He looks extremely ugly. The two hands holding onto the edge of the bell were thin and long, with fingers like spider legs, which felt like they could snap with just a slight touch. The old magician explained beside him. I got this bell in the ruins in the early years. There is a monster sealed in it, which is this guy. You can control it by holding the bell. The opening spell is the sentence on the shell. When you take it back, recite it backwards. Reading backwards? This is too tiring. Gretel was secretly speechless. The old magician seemed to know what he was thinking, and added. You can change the opening spell by using your mental power to imprint it on him. Gretel quickly thanked him. Master Tolga waved his hand. It's nothing. Asking for your unique secret recipe should be some compensation. This guy is not very strong, but his hands are quite skillful. He can help you make some accessories and so on. As he said this, he glanced at the monster. The monster had completely crawled out of the bell. It was doing somersaults on the ground, raising a dragonfly, tossing back and forth, and muttering curses. A smile flashed in the old magician's eyes. This thing is quite loyal, but it has a bad temper and likes to curse. If you make it some delicious food, its work efficiency will be doubled. If it doesn't know how to cook, you can just buy a few candies for it. Can you make jewelry? Very good. My microscope? My slides, cover slips. My syringe? My needle? Gretel's eyes brightened. He respectfully thanked him again, quickly picked up the little monster and ran back to his room. The old magician slowly added from behind. By the way, the energy that keeps this thing moving in the outside world is gold coins. It's a gold coin. It's a gold coin. It's a gold coin. Gretel's legs went weak and he almost fell down. Gold. How many gold coins does he have left in his pocket now? How many days will it take to hire this thing? Is the cost of asking him to make microscopes and needles higher than buying them in the market? I'll rename it Gold Coin later. Greet thought viciously. He put the little monster back into the bell and walked quickly into the room. Selina had already walked out of the innermost room. His face was red and his trouser legs were a little damp. When he saw Gretel, he reflexively stepped aside. She's doing much better. Thank you. Nothing, I'm a healer. Greet smiled and nodded, passing by the female knight, and walked quickly inside. I'm going to see her. By the way, are the things she solved still there? They haven't been thrown away. Bar. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. There was still no sound from behind. When Gretel turned around, he saw that half of the female knight's cheeks and ears were dyed pink. He had no choice but to shrug, spread his hands to himself, and continue walking inside. Whether the parasites in this world are roundworms or not, as a doctor, he must see it with his own eyes before he can be reassured. Not yet. I'll take you there. As soon as he walked into the longhouse door, the female knight had already followed. Although he still refused to look at Gretel, he walked faster and faster, and soon passed him. She turned left and right to guide Greet, and finally, holding her nose, she dragged a wooden barrel out of the corner. Here, what are you looking at? Greet had already picked up a water ladle, scooped up water, and poured it into the barrel. The small black pottery dish in the left hand and the wooden stick in the right hand were stirred in the wooden barrel. Soon, white worms were stirred up. Greet picked up a few and put them on the plate. After careful observation, he found that they were indeed the same as the round worms he had seen in his previous life. They are long and thin, with horizontal stripes on the body surface, and some have curled tails. When I was doing a parenteral rotation in my previous life, I was treated by a patient with roundworm intestinal obstruction. Unfortunately, at noon that day, the lunch box left for them was fried noodles. That time, several interns couldn't eat even half a mouthful. I felt really disgusted when I endorsed it in my previous life, and even laughed at the feces pickers at the gastrointestinal surgery department. Now in this other world, I actually watched it with concentration. All I can say is that working for yourself is really different. He washed his hands carefully, went back to see the patient, and saw that Iris's bulging belly had indeed become much flatter. I took another look with X-ray magic to make sure there were no signs of intestinal strangulation or intestinal perforation, and breathed out. Give her a cup of sugar-salted water, and half an hour later, eat something soft. Then drink a cup of scallion oil an hour after the meal. She will be relieved a few times in the middle of the night to expel all the bugs. How many more times do we have to come? Both girls wailed in unison. Greet nodded and was about to say a few more words of comfort when his expression suddenly changed and he ran away. This time, he ran as fast as Iris, who was clutching her belly. Thanks to @LoftsWave for the 500 starting coin reward. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. Yesterday's subscription was really bleak. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 180. Greet rushed into the room. He kept his head down and ran as fast as a monster was chasing him. The female knight called him from behind, but Gretel pretended not to hear. Master Tolga shouted okay, Gretel nodded casually and kept walking. Elderwood laughed loudly and said, Greet, you haven't returned the stick to me yet. Bernard, watch the door for me. Don't let anyone in. Gretel rushed into a guest room, the one he settled in when he last came here, and slammed the door. The two old men looked at each other and were about to laugh at him, but their faces turned pale. This is... Elderwood suddenly stood up. He rushed to Iris's room, took back the oak staff with the same momentum as snatching it, turned around and rushed back. Not far from the door of the guest room, Master Tolga stood blankly, with a stern look on his face. Is this wave so strong? He instinctively wanted to go in and take a look. As soon as he took a step, the barbarian raised the bone club in a wary manner. Elderwood was angry and funny. He pulled the old magician 2 steps back and slapped his staff. On the dirt floor at the door of the room, a trace of green grass broke through the dirt and swayed out. As soon as it popped up, it bent down towards the inside of the guest room. What a strong elemental vortex! Elderwood looked solemn. In his perception, what existed in the room was no longer a human being, but a whistling and rotating small tornado, constantly sucking the surrounding power into it. He gently stretched out his left hand, spread his fingers, and stared at the cold hairs standing on the back of his hand. The invisible wind of elements is flowing through the fingers and blowing into the guest room. If it was a level 4, 5, or stronger spellcaster, such movement would be nothing. The problem is, Gretel is only a second-level priest and a first-level magician. The leaf on the oak staff is still tender green, the upgrade fluctuations are so strong. How did he do it? Can he control it? Gretel didn't even think about whether he could control it. He fell down on the bed, assumed a not-so-standard meditation posture, and quickly closed his eyes. In his meditation vision, the various elements of earth, water, fire, and wind became brighter one by one. In the void, a translucent light person stood silently. Power silently pours in from all directions, filling the bones and muscles of self. The power this time was different from the gentleness and calmness when the priest leveled up. It was more turbulent and violent. Gretel had to concentrate all his attention to guide them in and arrange them one by one. Around the light man, the shell that carries and filters elements becomes stronger, and the power of the elements between the shell and the core ripples silently, waiting for his further arrangements. Gretel knew that his work was not over yet. The upgrade of a formal magician is different from that of a mage apprentice. Gretel had long heard in the training class that every time a formal magician gains a level, he can and must carve a magic spell in a meditation environment. The step of engraving is to use mental power to build a strong enough spell model in the shell and core. This magic can be learned or created by oneself. Of course, if it is a magic created by the mage, it will be more powerful after upgrade. Moreover, you can basically ignore the casting materials, skip the chanting, and achieve instant telekinesis. The engraved magic cannot exceed the level of the magician before upgrading. Of course, it doesn't matter if it is a lower level, but it is a bit wasteful. Generally speaking, magicians will choose the most advanced spells they have mastered. So which one to choose? Gretel was in trouble. Magic tricks, mage's hands, X-ray magic, B ultrasound magic. Bubbles, mage armor, burning hands, changing wind. The magic tricks I had learned were running through my mind one by one. Commonly used, not commonly used, high level, low level, self-created, non-self-created. Spell models rose up one by one, stimulating feedback from external elements, and were then dispersed by Gretel with his thoughts. After several attempts, Gretel discovered that, higher level magic attracts stronger elemental fluctuations than lower level magic, self-created magic attracts stronger fluctuations than those created by others. Of course, Greet still doesn't know what the attracted elements can do. He only knows one thing. Once you get into this shell, it belongs to me and you are not allowed to leave. Comparatively, among the several magics, the one with the strongest power to induce elements is the burning hand. Gretel was a little excited to imagine that in the future, she would not have to hold a test tube of oxygen, nor would she have to search for potassium permanganate everywhere, but could just burn people with white fire. However, when he was about to use his mental power to construct this magic, he hesitated a little. Is this what matters most to me? Is lethality really what I want? He turned his attention to B ultrasound magic. As far as the mind could see, this magic spell model quickly lit up in the meditation environment. Vibration, frequency, direction, feedback, interpretation. Circles, triangles, wavy curves, various shapes and lines are combined to create a three-dimensional structure. It was okay when I was simply casting spells, but now I started to construct with mental power, and it immediately made people confused. This is much more difficult than drawing a three-dimensional image on a computer, as there are no tools. For example, in the structure of B ultrasound magic, there is a section of Gretel that looks familiar, like a sine curve. The problem is that there is no ruler, no compass, empty hands, or empty mind to draw curves in a meditative environment. Isn't this fatal? Gretel calmed down and began to mobilize his mental power to outline the spell model one stroke at a time. Straight lines, curves, three-dimensional, draw them out, fill them in with spiritual power, and connect several parts to each other. Regarding the method of drawing spell models, especially difficult curves, the Mage Tower used to only say draw according to the scroll. As for whether the drawing is accurate or not, and whether the drawing mage has a handicap, that is absolutely irrelevant. Therefore, when different magicians learn the same magic, the effects can be very different. Some look like those cast by the Monkey King, while others look like those cast by monkeys performing monkey tricks on the street. But this time when I entered the training class, regarding the spell model, the teacher gave a new method. Use math. What is a triangle? What is a circle? What is a curve? That's all mathematics. What? Are you not good at math? Mathematics is the foundation of arcana. If you can't learn mathematics well, don't become an arcana master. So is this sinusoidal line. By the way, I remember the formula is y equals sin, omega x plus phi, plus k, let me plug it in and see. By the way, a is the amplitude, omega is the angular frequency, let me put adjust these two values and see what happens. Then, meditating on the self in my field of vision, my eyes widened in astonishment. For the first time, besides the four elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, something else appeared. I can't say what it is, but it is undulating and vibrating in waves, passing to nowhere, and reflecting back from nowhere. This is a wave. It's a wave. Whether it is longitudinal waves or transverse waves, electromagnetic waves or mechanical waves, for the first time in his meditation vision, such a thing as a wave appeared. Feedback from the world of meditation is pouring in. Ultrasound magic, a variant of echo magic, was a gadget that only received 2 research points in the Magic Council. In Gretel's meditation environment, it was solid, and shimmering. After filling this spell model, the elements that poured into the meditation environment continued to spread out, increasing the concentration of elements inside the shell by at least 10% in one breath. Gretel opened his eyes with satisfaction. Yeah. I don't have to carry a bunch of bats anymore. Thanks to Atoni who loves to play roller coasters for the 500 starting coin reward. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, please recommend votes. Today's data is simply